It's 8:13 on this Tuesday morning. We're joined by Jennifer Banks of TechMommy.ca, Carol McBee of Mommy Connections, and Wendy Mueller of Edmonton's Child Magazine and Urban Infant. We're resuming a conversation, a very interesting one we started in the 7 o'clock hour. You're saying stranger danger, it's outdated parental advice.
Absolutely.
Plain and simple. Yes, it's outdated. The reason why we're talking about this, folks, if you missed it, we were all kind of taken aback. I'll speak for myself. Reading a blog entry, you talked about your young daughter, 3 years old at the time, went missing at the Tell Us World of Science. You found her sitting on a stranger's lap, and you thought, yeah, copacetic. That's cool.
Well, I didn't think that was cool, but I wasn't going to freak out either, because I don't think it's a part of me to be a parent to instill like nervousness or apprehension about people she doesn't know, and to make her afraid of situations and people.
Viewers have been checking in on our Facebook page. Shaylee says, we live in a sick world, trust no one. Charlene says, thank God my child didn't trust a stranger when he was little, or I wouldn't have him, as this creep tried to take him. Serena says, exactly, this thing happened to me as a kid. I ran like hell. I make sure my kids know about the dangers now. Wendy, your kids are a little bit older. You've got a whole bunch in the teenage years, and you were telling us that you think that sometimes advice has to be obviously age appropriate, but probably child appropriate too.
Yeah, absolutely. Each child is different. And I agree with Jen. You don't want to create kids that are fearful of situations, because you don't want to create antisocial children either. You want them to be well-adjusted and healthy, but it's finding that balance and being prepared and having kids that are aware of their surroundings, trusting their instincts, and then communicating with you as parents to be able to figure out what's my next step if I'm in this situation. So doing a bit of role-playing in different scenarios, but they need to know that there are bad things out there and things that happen to children.
It's been interesting to hear the three of you carry on this discussion for the last hour in the green room. And Carol, you were talking about your children's, that ability that they need to have to identify helpers. And sometimes, I guess, helpers can come in the form of law enforcement officials or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But sometimes it might just be a perfect stranger.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is really important that your kids understand that if they do see someone in uniform, especially a police officer, that police officers aren't always there to enforce. They're there to help. So that's definitely someone that, you know, they can trust to a certain extent. I know over the summer we were at Capital X, and my husband and I and daughter saw two little girls that were lost, and those little girls had to be trusting to us that we would try and help them find their parents. We walked up to them. They looked very lost, and they were lost, in fact, all by themselves. And you know, if we taught our daughter, don't ever talk to anyone ever, those little girls wouldn't have talked to us. I mean, there is a lot of very strange people in this world, and especially at outdoor exhibitions and that sort of thing. They didn't know who to trust. They didn't see any police officers around. They told us that, and we were able to help them and find their parents. So I think what Jen was saying, it is really smart for them to understand that there is strangers out there, but there has to be a certain level of trust and just trusting their own gut instinct.
Well, and you talk about that instinct, and I mean, you know, there's heartbreaking examples that we see, and I mean, Amanda, one of our Facebook friends, a breakfast television viewer, leaves her story on our page. We don't have time to read the entire thing, but her cousin, Corinne Punky Gustafson, Edmontonians will remember that tragic story. Just a young girl abducted back in September of 1992, or we look at stories like Victoria Tori Stafford that went missing, or all of these stories. I mean, look at Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. They didn't look like criminals. They looked like, I mean, you know, or there's examples as adults. I mean, Ted Bundy was famously sort of this ordinary, good-looking guy. He didn't look like what he turned out to be, what the reality was. I mean, is it ignorant, or is it, I mean, how, at some point to say a child at a young age can have that gut instinct, is it, I mean, how do you release yourself as a parent? That would be nerve-wracking.
Well, I think that I tell my daughter if she's in trouble or she has a funny feeling and she can't find me or my husband, to find a mom, someone with kids, and to go and talk to a mom. But I also think, even though I'm on TV, that media has a tendency to maybe blow things a little out of proportion, because we're not talking about the kids that are affected by or hurt by their parents or someone they knew or a friend. I mean, these stories are just as, they happen a lot, but it's not something that's going to end up on TV. So for me, I think there's a big difference between a possibility of something happening and a probability of something happening.
And I have to go to break here, but very quickly, Wendy, I mean, yourself as the parent of teenagers, online safety and sharing is a whole different discussion. I mean, you're having to find those boundaries and that advice.
I think my message would be that we need to give our kids the tools to survive when they start getting on their own, both out in the world but online as well. So it's being prepared as parents, knowing what those little things that you can, tips and ideas that you can give them, and then they start honing those skills, so you keep discussing it.
You know
we
what?
have to prepare them.
It is our hope that this discussion will continue on Twitter, on our Facebook page. We want to hear from parents. We know there's different advice. We know that there's good advice from different perspectives. We want to thank Wendy Mueller, Carol McBee, and Jennifer Banks for joining us. You can find links to Jen's blog that started this whole discussion under the Inside BT link on our website. We'll be right back with more. Bridget Ryan at the Valley Zoo right after this. It's 8:19 Tuesday morning.